Okay, so here goes. My name is MeaTLoTioN. I wasn't actually born with this name, but it's all gravy. I was born and raised in Ramsgate, Kent, some number of decades ago. I shan't tell you how many just now. I work in IT, and I have done since I was about 14. I'm a developer in various languages like Python, Pascal, PHP, JavaScript, and some POSIX-compatible scripting languages like Bash. My phone just made a noise at the wrong time. I run Linux on my computer. Ubuntu is the flavour currently, and I prefer the command line over the point-and-clicky graphical user interface you find on so commonplace nowadays. Bit about my hobby. I enjoy art, but potentially not the kind of art which many people are aware of. The art I enjoy usually only features within the confines of a computer screen, but it isn't pixel art. The art I enjoy is entirely made up of plain text characters you might see in a typed letter, sometimes text you might not recognise as text, but I can explain more about that shortly. Text mode art is one of my hobbies. I'm in no way any kind of authority in the genre, just to say that I enjoy it enough to have a passion about it, and a passion in which I wish to share with you guys today. Maybe if I do a good enough job at explaining what it is, people might be interested enough to learn more about it and even try their hand at making some. So with all that said, I should really like to get my screen share on the show and show you some things that I'm talking about here. So I'm going to try and figure out how to do that now. And hopefully you can now all see my screen share. I can't see the chat, so if Andy wants to give me a thumbs up, I know that I've got the screen share working.
Yeah, it's working.
Brilliant. Okay, so AnsI Art, or the art of text, as I've called it in my slides. What is AnsI Art? Well, let's go back a bit first before I talk about AnsI Art and talk about art of text. There's typewriter art, and that started way back in 1898. The very first well-known drawing, well-known in the genre, and people might not have all heard about it, but people that know about typewriter art will know that the very first well-known drawing in typewriter art was of a butterfly by Flora F.F. Stacey in 1898. Flora was an English stenographer, someone who transcribed speech into shorthand, and has been experimenting with art typing for several years before 1898 Butterfly catapulted her into international fame. The first edition of Pitman's typewriter manual, published in 1893, included several examples of typed ornaments that a typewriter operator could use to embellish his or her work. Though Stacey may have well produced more typewriter art before her famous butterfly, none of it is preserved, and the anonymous plate from the 1893 manual is now considered the first recorded example of art typing. So with that said, that's what typewriter art is. Typewriters are probably devices that the kids of today probably don't even know about. Adults might do, but a typewriter is a very manual device way before computers. Anyway, so let's go on to slide 2, and I'll read a bit about the computer version of typewriter art. So it's called ASCII. That was the first iteration, ASCII, which stands for the American Standard Code for Information Interchange. It's a character set, and each character has been assigned a value, but I'll talk about that more a bit later. So ASCII Art is a graphic design technique that uses computers for presentation and consists of pictures pieced together for the 95 printable from a total of 128 characters defined by the ASCII standard from 1963, and ASCII compliant character sets with a proprietary extended characters beyond 128 characters of standard 7-bit ASCII. The term is also loosely used to refer to text-based visual art in general. ASCII art can be created with any text editor and is often used with free-form languages. Most examples of ASCII art requires a fixed-width font, non-proportional fonts, as on a traditional typewriter, such as Courier for presentation. ASCII art was invented in large part because of early printers often lacked graphics abilities, and thus characters were used in place of graphic marks. Here is a list of the extended and standard character sets of ASCII. So any computer would use a character set when you type, and these are all the characters in that particular standard Cyrillic character set. The first 127, which is the top 0 to 7 rows, they are your standard characters that you'd probably recognize from a typewriter or when you type a letter to someone. And then the further 127 or the below 127 are the extended characters. I'll go a bit more into about them a bit later, but just know that ASCII is more along the lines of typewriter art than the set below, but they're all part of the same set. So with that said, I'll show you an early ASCII art from the 1990s. And that was when ASCII art really kind of first took off through mediums such as bulletin boards, which I can explain more about later. So as you can see, it's a picture of a bat made up of characters from the lower, or sorry, the upper character set. I did that the wrong way around on the previous slide, but the higher numbers, so 0 through 127, are just standard characters, and this bat is made up of characters found on that character set. This was made in 1990 by someone called DP Biter for their bulletin board. A bulletin board, as I say, we'll go into a bit later on, but it's just a very simple drawing using characters to give the impression of a bat. Technology has developed a little bit since then. People have got a bit cleverer. We still have the same restrictions, but they're getting more adventurous. And this is something that you might find in today's ASCII arts. So a bit of colour, bit of smoothing around the edges to make things look more like curves. And this particular ANSI art, or ASCII art, I should say here, it was created for the program, the developer who makes the program to draw these in the first place. So this was like the advertising ASCII art, if you like, of that particular program called Mobius. Mobius is a very new program to create this stuff. Previously, we used to use programs like Pablo Draw, and back in the 90s, pretty much the only program that was available to us to do this drawing was called The Draw, which I can go about it a bit more later. So that's ASCII art, using standard character sets, stuff that you would find on typewriter. You can see vertical bars or pipes, as we call them. There's letter T's, you've got forward and backslashes, underscores, you've got the caret symbol, less than and greater than bracket signs, pretty much the standard characters you'd find on a standard typewriter. But let's move on to ANSI. ANSI was the extended character set, or the lower part of that, that you saw on the previous slide. So ANSI art is a computer art form that was widely used at one time on bulletin board systems. It is similar to ASCII art, but constructed from a larger set of 256 letters, numbers, and symbols. All codes found on the IBM code page 437, often referred to as extended ASCII and used in MS-DOS and Unix environments. ANSI art also contains special ANSI escape sequences that color text with the 16 foreground and 18 background colors offered by ANSI.sys, an MS-DOS device driver loosely based upon the ANSI X3.64 standard for text terminals. Some ANSI artists take advantage of the cursor control sequences within ANSI in order to create animations commonly referred to as an ANSImation. ANSI art and text files which incorporate ANSI codes carry the de facto .ans file extension. Now, what does that mean? Well, the ANSImation part, I think, is probably more self-explanatory, but let's just have a look at some original ANSI art, which is using the extended character set. So this was an advertisement of a bulletin board called the Photographer's Network. This was back in 1990s. Everybody who had a bulletin board would do their own advertisements. They would explain what the board is about and the hours that it was run and a telephone number that you could reach it on. Bulletin boards are kind of pre-internet. Before people were always connected, their computers would have to be manually connected to someone else's computer. And when you connect to someone else's computer, you use a thing called a modem. A modem is an analog device that connects on a telephone line, and you would just dial a set of numbers like you would on a telephone to speak to someone. But instead of speaking to a human, your computer would dial the numbers and speak to another computer. What would happen was your terminal application would connect to the other person's computer, and the other person's computer would then send a bunch of characters across the screen so that you could interact with that computer. Normally, that would be a bulletin board. There are other things that you could do with it, but typically when I was growing up, bulletin boards were the thing that you would do. So this is a typical AnsI Art advertising a particular bulletin board I found. So what do they look like now? Well, let's go a bit more about AnsI Art first. AnsI Art is considerably more flexible than ASCII Art because the particular character set it uses contains symbols extended for drawing, such as a wide variety of box drawing characters and block characters that dither foreground and background color. I'll just go back to that previous slide. You can see that there's characters that you wouldn't necessarily see on a typewriter. The ones specifically the shading blocks and the full blocks that are blinking. They are not seen on a typewriter, but they are still part of the extended ASCII character set or the ANSI character set. It also adds accented characters and math symbols often found creative among ANSI artists. The popularity of ANSI Art encouraged the creation of a powerful shareware package called The Draw, coded by Ian E. Davis in 1986. Not only did it considerably simplify the process of making the ANSI Art screen from scratch, but it also included a variety of fonts, large letters constructed from box and block characters. The transition animations such as Dissolve and Clock, a new version of the Draw emerged after version 4.63 in 1993, but in later years a number of other ANSI editors appeared, some of which are still maintained today. I did mention a couple of those earlier, and I'll go a bit more into those a bit later as well. So a recent ANSI Art from the 2020s. This is going to be displayed in a way that you would expect to see an ANSI Art displayed on a bulletin board back in the 90s. I've tried to encapsulate the best kind of feel with this, so bear with me. Here we go. So as you can see, the ANSI Art is completely different looking to ASCII Art in that we're using blocks, both full and shaded characters. Very few actual typed characters you'll see, like a typewriter type. Usually the artist or artists, if it's a collaboration, will sign the artwork. In this case, we can see down at the bottom, I'll try and highlight, I don't know if you can see the highlight, but down at the bottom row, you've got BS. And the person who, one of the people that drew it was called Burps, that's his name, or his tag. And the other person at the top, you'll see an N and an exclamation mark, and that is an abbreviation for Nail, the other ANSI artist. So this is kind of what bulletin boards used to have. People used to create these to decorate their bulletin boards to start with. And then as time progressed, ANSI artists got better and they started to take it further into its own kind of genre. And eventually people were creating art just for the sake of art. And then they would form groups, and the groups would collate all the artwork of the artist in that group. And then every month or every couple of months, they would release an art pack to people that would, that would want to view that and use it for their bulletin boards. So here's a couple of links that I've got written down for various reasons. Mobius at the top and Pablo Draw, they're the recent bits of software that you could use to create such ANSI Art and ASCII Art. I have a couple of links to some artists on 16 Colors. 16 Colors is a website, or 16color.rs is the website where people such as myself would want to create art for an art pack. The art pack gets published. I've obviously included myself, not in any particular order. I definitely don't think I'm the best. I'm just learning myself, actually, but I've only been doing it 2 years. Some of these people have been doing it for decades. And my favorite artist is actually this one here, Untitled, and this is the person that I strive to want to be one day, drawing like. But here's some links. I'll put them in the chat later. We've also got some ASCII artists and their links. So we've got Prismate and Anachronist. Anachronist was the guy that drew the Mobius logo back in slide 6, I think it was. And then I've got some links for 2 recent art packs. So you've got Legacy Group or Legacy Crew, and they've got an anime art pack. I have actually one piece in that pack, which is the piece that you can see as my my little icon in Zoom right now, and the Mr. Degree pack, which was the January 21 pack. And then we've got a mega joint scroller, so a whole team of ANSI artists collaborated together and created this. I guess it's the world's longest ANSI art, and it is pretty huge actually. Typically, ANSI art for BBSs would be 80 columns because that's the width of a screen in text mode, but they don't have to have a length as such. A standard screen resolution would be 80 by 25, so 80 columns by 25 rows. The 25th row usually would have a status bar for the terminal package. However, when you're displaying the ANSI art, it doesn't have to show that status bar when you're displaying it if it's longer than the screen. And then when it is longer than the screen, as you saw in the previous ANSI art, it kind of pushes the art upwards as it draws the characters. And when people used to have modems connecting to bulletin boards, their modems would be 14K or 28K, or sometimes even slower than that. Back in the day, it was like 9K or gosh, 300 bytes a second. And that's when you start to see the individual characters get drawn to the screen, because it has to transmit that many characters to the screen via the telephone lines. But yeah, so that's kind of what ANSI Art is. I have been recently learning to draw and been drawing for about two and a bit years now. That is what ANSI Art is. Hopefully people have been a little bit inspired with some of the drawings they've seen. It looks pretty simple, but when it comes to shading and making things look a bit better than just a couple of bits of text on the screen, the difference between the bats and the snowmen, shall we say, it can take a long time to draw. I've recently drew a motorbike for a pack that I was doing for some MotoGP stuff, and I spent about a month drawing a bike. It can take a while, and it wasn't particularly massive either. It just takes so long to do pieces at a time. Yeah, I don't, I think that's really all I can say on it. As I say before, I'm not any kind of authority on ANSI Art. It's just something that I'm passionate about and I enjoy, and hopefully other people do too. And it'd be cool to get like younger people to see that and take it up, because it would be nice to keep it going and then not die out. It's something that was created back in the 80s, 90s, and we're now nearly 40 years on nearly, and people are still doing it. But the people that started doing it, they're getting a bit old, and it'd be nice to pass the baton on. So yeah, that's pretty much all I can say on it really. So just one more thing to say, and that's thank you for listening to me going on about ANSI Art. And if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them if I can.